So, guys, we are gonna have a short space over a couple of things. Uh, First of all, I'm going to comment on what we are seeing from the Russian Ministry of Defense. And I would like to pull a line here. Yes, we are seeing a lot. Yes, we are seeing stuff that was unthinkable, which once again is not true, guys. These things happened in 22 and 23. It's just that right now the Russians are literally giving the receipts a day or a couple of days after, which makes it extremely damaging to the whole, uh, I'd say, mindset of the Ukrainian followers, especially on social media, because right now, I'm sorry, guys, but yeah, we just lost, we quote unquote, lost the project 2260. And after that, it was a deluge of shit that befell the Ukrainians. And this latest strike is probably the most hilarious thing that happened. So I'm going to start with what is my comprehension of the action, given that we have two videos from the same location. The first video that was spread was actually the three helicopters getting peppered and then taken out 2 out of 3. However, another video followed, or basically they were shown at the same time. I don't care, but and that video showed a shark team with a Ural picking up their pieces and going back to a barn. That barn got whatever it was there flattened out. Like no way that shit was flying. Today, within a certain group, I said, because some people told that a Patriot was destroyed, and I said, yeah, because I heard something about the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, and I thought this was it, that the Patriot had been taken out, and I was already preparing the memes. I wasn't expecting these guys. Honestly, I wasn't. And indeed, in Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, they first hit this drone crew, and they hit it good. I posted on my timeline. You can see that crew survived properly in there. And I think after that hit, whoever was still alive or around that area, that control center, whatever you want to call it, called for a quick evacuation, a medevac. And the Russians stood, they waited until the medevac came. They let them drop down, started to cut their engines, and then they showered them with Smerch, I think. Given the distance, it has to be Smerch. Now, I had a small discussion with a other Ziegler, and I would like to apologize for the tone I used, but the point is that that target was, in my opinion, for the Russian side, treated properly. And it was hit by a cluster fired from a GPS guided rocket, probably from max range between 80 and 90 kilometers, which meant that from firing to impact point was about 2 minutes to 20 seconds, depending who you listen. This had for effect or expected effect that all three helicopters wouldn't be able to fly, because then to finish them off, they launched another guided attack. We are not sure which missile was used because it seems long enough for a KH-35, but the explosion doesn't look big enough for a KH-35. So we are expecting a better view or whatever. But right now, what is more important is that the Russians staged a proper ambush and took out very valuable assets from Ukrainians. And both helicopters seem to be Mi-17s that the Afghan government lost after the Americans kept them in the US and then gifted to the Ukrainian government post the fall of the Ghani government, the pro-American Ghani government. Most important part here, yeah, bro. Nimrod, please, if you want to intervene right away, go. You go on, man. I don't know if I cut you, whatever. Please tell me. Okay. Anyway, guys, when G is gonna be able to come back, I'm gonna actually let him speak. But basically, the most important part right now is everybody on the Ukrainian side, after a couple of these shows, are in full panic and are discussing about improved ISR. Well, the group knows already because I spoke a little bit about it, and I'm expecting bigger correspondents or bigger bloggers or whatever to start speaking about what's going on. But for a while now, the Russians had sought to acquire 5G technology, uh, unfortunately, still fully terrestrial with a SATCOM column. So basically, on the ground 5G, and then for C2 for high value HVT, um, a SATCOM system of communication that would be bulletproof. In this deal, a lot of people have said that what suddenly the Russians are using Starlink. The Starlink story, when you think about it, a lot of people say that they were being bought in mass, but what I'm seeing right now everywhere is that maybe 200 to 300 systems have been bought or are in function, and about 15 to 20 have been seen targeted by the Ukrainians. So this doesn't at all compare to what the Ukrainians were doing with the Starlinks. I'm speaking, the Ukrainians are using Starlinks for every single shitty attack, USV. So they have no problem purchasing them, having plans for them, and destroying them. I also told you guys, or I think I told you guys, that they are spoofed, so they can receive and emit while moving, because for a normal Starlink dish, you need to stay steady to actually receive internet. So the biggest problem that we're having right now on the Russian side is that how the fuck come that with 200 to 300 dishes you are having this very short discussion? What's going on is quite contrary. Is that the Russians are using the Starlink element as a cover for what they're doing with the Chinese. I'm gonna spill the beans. Sooner or later, it's gonna happen. So I'm gonna tell it before, so you guys know what's going on beforehand, and then when it's gonna be revealed, you're gonna once again find yourself saying, "What the fuck's going on? Who the fuck are these guys that know this shit?" It has nothing to do. It's not special. It's not magic. We don't have many inside knowledge. It's simply the fact that in order for a couple of systems to work the way they are working right now, common side, and in order even for the IZ or Eye of God, as they have named it, the new UAV system. If you see on the top corner of that system, I'm going to republish one thing that Nimrod or yes, Nimrod posted that. You're going to see that it's a requirement for a satellite or communication line to be on that. That shit works both on 5G and also on SATCOM. This is not possible with the current type of usage that the Russians do, because a lot of the communication still went through normal cellular towers, which made it extremely complicated for them to blunt the towers because they would lose commo as well, on top of the Ukrainians losing commo and the normal population. This is one of the biggest issues that they have to stop the USVs from latching on their cell towers and then following the beach landscape, the coast landscape, to go towards where they need to go for those Novorossiysk, Simferopol, Sevastopol. Whenever they need to attack at some point for the terminal strike, they're going to start latching on the cellular network, and then once they're between 3 to 5 kilometers from the target, then the Starlink connection kicks in, and they can go to the boat without having a problem. So, what's going on? I am 200% sure that is a supposedly brand new Chinese company that has been put together by the Russians last year between October and November, mainly to actually coordinate their IFF for the Air Force and ground air defense systems. You might laugh and you say, "What the fuck? That shit doesn't work, bro." I mean, if they're trying that stuff, why did they have the friendly fires? I think that most of the IFF right now is being tested from air-to-air component and ground-to-air component. Russians are integrating all this shit. It's not always simple to work out, and I don't think the infrastructure for that shit is as good as it stands. I always have said in the common group that they should have gone for Chinese IFF equipment for the moment. It doesn't cost too much. They can play with it. The Chinese will not bother for IP when it comes to that, because they can always give them shit that they give to the Pakistanis, and it will still work. And for the Chinese, it will even be I'd say, um, a guarantee of the Russians not going astray if something happens to the current partnership and alliance between the two countries. So, in that aspect, the Russians for that front, so VKS, VVS, and GBAD, they should literally stop fucking around with all this stuff. But when it comes to communication for strike crews, that thing is working fucking wonders. On top of it, there is ISR available, and that ISR is not the old one. It's not 3 to 5 canopus slash whatever bullshit they had for Lukoil and Gazprom. Now, whatever is in the sky, it's extremely accurate. We're speaking to 2.8 meters, and probably they have the same capabilities as ICI, which is a translucent penetration to the surface. I don't know if you guys have seen an ICI render from satellite. They can actually, by enhancing the contrast from the exposure of light and heat, uh, see that through sheet cover and thin cover. It mostly works with hangers. It doesn't work with a lot of other covers like concrete or large structures, multi-story structures. I am 100% sure that it's working like that because some of the latest strikes and some of the guesswork, quote unquote, cannot be simple autism on the Russian side. However, once again, this is all, in the air. We're gonna have, in my opinion, soon enough, uh, a kind of evidence for that, either from Russia itself, either from the US, which is going to invariably accuse the Chinese for that, because it's pretty simple. Nobody else right now has a, I'd say, opposite system that could basically countervalue the American one. So my opinion is, and I'm going to point out a couple of such examples. My opinion is that things have improved, but when it comes to the strike potential itself, the best part wasn't that it has improved so dramatically. The best part is now everything is available. The strike over the helicopters included at least 3 different assets. One was localized ISR, which was Supercam and Zala for sure. Second was the Air Force intervention, both with either UMPK or any kind of other munition that was used to take out the barn. And then, of course, the ground forces with their own battery of whatever it was. Actually, it was probably only one launcher of Smerch in this case. So you have all 3 elements there perfectly, quote unquote, because of course Comrade Cole would say it wasn't perfect, they let one go away. Okay, I'm gonna accept that. It's better 66% than 0%. But the thing is that these people, in this very simple operation, managed to first of all spoof out a command point, and very important one, then pull in, bait 3 helicopters, take two of them out, and for good, because we have obituaries already of at least five pilots or whatever, pilots plus flying personnel. And then this 55 kilometers from a fucking front, and in a rather protected area in Dnipropetrovsk. I just want to tell you how fucking important this shit is, because I think those drones were also fucking supplying info and data to the HIMARS batteries, of which one wasn't that close to it, but the Patriots were not too far from that area. So what we have right here is, I think, a sustained, both qualitative evolution of the Russian military, but also the evidence that that fucking overblown old school system can fucking learn. Now, of course, this might be an outlier. I'm the first guy to say that fucking easy peasy, let's wait for that shit. And in this case, let's wait for more. What is most important here is not that we wait for more, not wait for more, but the fact that the other side is fucking panicking. And the other side right now is trying to apply a failed policy of the Russian Federation. And I say a failed one because the de-energization campaign of 2022, 2023, while it had some results, at the end didn't solve the problems of the Russian Federation. It caused damage, which was more or less uh, repaired, managed in a sense, but ultimately it didn't change the fate of Kherson. It didn't stop immediately the Ukrainian push towards Lugansk, and it was a real proper counter value operation, which caused a lot of damage and made life miserable for Ukrainians. But at the end, didn't absolutely change what we're seeing. What Ukrainians are doing right now is trying to deprive Russia from money, which is stupid. I'm saying it's stupid because a lot of people right now are talking about, oh my God, it's going to take 6 months to a year to repair all the fracking and vacuum units. And I'm like, guys, trust me, it's going to take less than that. But the problem is not even that. Because if it should take 6 months to a year, they would start building smaller refineries further. And those would take, if they started building 4 or 5 of them at the same time, instead of repairing, they will have extra units on the back while they're repairing what's up front. The biggest problem for Ukraine right now is whatever they're doing, first of all, are mosquito bites. Second of all, they rely on rather unpreparedness of the Russian side when it comes to defend some very crucial value targets. But at the same time, all this can be killed right now only once. It's very simple. And whereas taking out the Black Sea Fleet, limiting it, impeding it, whatever, might be a good idea. I'm saying right now it's not a good idea because that's the fucking problem. You are not exploiting it, except for going to get killed in Tendorska Spit, but that's Ukrainians for you. The biggest problem is that it's not changing the fortunes on the battlefield, and we can think that okay, they're gonna have less money. No, right now, whatever Russia needs as a budget for 2024 is already there. What the damage you're doing right now, quote unquote, is gonna be for next year, for which apparently Putin has another plan, which is hiking the revenue tax for the lower strata from 13 to 15, and for the higher strata from 15 to 20%, which should bring him about 200 billions in revenue more. I'm speaking dollars, guys. not rubles. So here we got a funny part. If indeed that thing is gonna work, so that Putin is gonna have that much more taxes, 200 billions, which would be, sorry guys, just under 10% of the nominal GDP. Let me tell you how what's gonna happen. Ukraine for 25, 26, because the war is going to go into 26 for sure, is fucked. And not as much because they're not going to win on the military field. They're not going to be a counter and this and that. No, they're fucked because Russia will have the money to invest in more of the shit we're seeing. And we spoke about this last year in around September, October. That I said, guys, whoever is doing there in Ukraine, they better like go fast because the Russians are going to bring more new tools, and we're seeing them. We had the UMPB 30. We are having couple of sites of the new Lancet. We are having now a huge fucking retarded contraption on Gerans. We have had Gerans with jet powered turbines. We have having extremely accurate Iskanders, which have replaced the countermeasures that they had before with now Cometa boards, which means that the missile is going to be a lot more accurate and with a higher bandwidth of control and targeting, given that instead of having just one set of GPS receivers, two sets, now it has 8. So, all this is just showing guys that whoever is helping Russia now except for itself, and I'm telling you, 90% of this is Russian. These guys are not panhandling for technology right now. When they need to buy it, they have done it. They don't fucking care. It is a mental barrier there that they, for instance, for the Chinese, I said IFF should have been bought for ages. That would cost them less than €1 billion worth of equipment to equip their whole fucking aircraft force. Same for what we saw with the new 122 millimeter ammunition. That looks a lot like the Chinese base bleed wrap long range ammunition, but with Russian filler. Initially, I thought that that may be probably ordered in China, landed in North Korea, and then transferred to Russia. But then Belarus has an extremely close connection with the Chinese, so it's also possible that the Belarusians are laundering for the Russians. The options for the Russians right now, when it comes to waging war, I'm not saying winning peace, I'm not saying rebounding economically, I'm saying waging war, are literally infinite. The only thing that they need to fucking optimize is deciding how they're going to tackle the drone situation. While the Baba Yagas have less impact than they had a year before, the FPVs are being a problem, mostly because now the Ukrainians, while they're using them a lot for vehicle warfare, they are using them for infantry because that means one soldier hit, one soldier dead most of the time. This, of course, is not always funny and it's not always productive, in my opinion, because you're going to use like 4 or 5 FPVs to kill what, 4 or 5 guys. But at the end, the point is to have guys pick up the wounded and hit them back, which they are still doing because they're assholes. But that's not the problem because, you know, on the other side, the Russians are dropping 3 to 700 kilograms of explosives up their heads, and instead of killing 4, 5, 10, 12 guys by FPVs, they are erasing whole fucking platoon by UMPKs. And as I said, the biggest problem right now for the Ukrainians is to hide the dead. And this is one of those things that I'm literally telling you guys is becoming problematic for the Ukrainian side. And for that, I'm going to speak probably at the end of the week based on elements that we have discussed with Trapped Ion over what the Ukrainian possibilities are when it comes to both a levy, a tax levy to avoid incorporation, and also to pay for the mobilization of those who don't have the money to be excluded from this forced mobilization. But generally speaking, the Ukrainians have a huge money problem. They have a huge manpower problem. They don't have a military asset problem. For what they need to do right now, they have enough. They can lay back, get like 60 barrels a year or even 120, and they will still manage to lose little by little the territory, but not enough so that they could be in a complete breakthrough phase for the Russians. However, as I said, for the Russians right now, the game is not that one. It's not to make huge, big arrow offensives. The point is to expel the Ukrainians from the Donbass, so basically Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast, and start, encroaching into Kharkov and advancing Zaporozhye. If you see the lines that are being built, the lines are there to stop the Russians from advancing further in Zaporozhye and threatening the city itself. That is another debate, another discussion. So far, what I've seen from the Ukrainians when it comes to those defensive lines is hilariously bad, but it mostly comes due to the fact that Ukrainians need to do something uh, in case they break in the current front line. This is something that we're seeing, for instance, in Avdiivka, west of it. Ukrainians are throwing whatever they want at Berdishi, or whatever they can actually at Berdishi, because, as I said, that part stays on the high ground, and once that falls, you have a double attack from Orlovka to Semenivka and from Berdishi to Semenivka, and then basically your first Ukrainian defense line is crumbling. And that allows for the advance towards Cheretine, Berezivka, and so on. We have already discussed about this. There is no point into going forward. One of the things that is being smartly done, although with casualties, is that the pressure is not relenting in all parts of the front. It must happen in the Kupiansk direction that the Russians reach the Oskol before mid-spring, because come spring, you're gonna have, of course, you already have partly Rasputitsa, but you're gonna have a water flush on the rivers and on the streams, which would for a while make it complicated for the Ukrainians, if they are losing bridges and crossing points, to actually go with what is their mainstay when it comes to logistics right now, which are pickups and civilian vehicles. So for the Russians, that what needs to happen is that need to be as close as possible to Oskil up north for, let's say, 10th of 20th of April, which is not too far. It's literally a month and something. As for Robotine, the fights are ongoing. There is advancement from Verbovoy. The Ukrainians now are back to the middle of the city. That needs to be culminated, and I think this is the front we're going to see a lot more attempts from the Russians once the logic that is being pursued in Avdiivka and all along that line in southern Donbass comes to a logical end, which is joining the the O0 53-2, and then the bypassing of Ugledar, which would put the front line between 15 and 20 kilometers westwards of where it is right now, and shorten the front line for Zaporozhye. Once that is shortened, the Ukrainians are going to have a lot more troubles. As I said, incrementally, hopefully around July, we would be in the situation where the Ukrainians are going to have to defend a Russian offensive in Zaporozhye. Not as much to seize the city itself, because right now they're advancing quite fast with the defensive works, which is unfortunately a bit what happened to the Ukrainians while the Russians were building the so-called Surovikin line. But that's something different. The main danger going forward right now is the air defense, and that job is being pretty well done right now, because right now, given that the Ukrainians needed to bring air defense closer to hit the Su-34s with MPKs, now the Sus would have to advance in order to cover the advance of their own troops when it comes to air defenses and also high power, long range artillery like HIMARS and other shitty things like that. So therefore, the ISR is very important right now. And what the Russians are demonstrating is hits beyond the 55 range. Penetration of Zala and supercamps is extremely interesting because once again, Ukrainians had rated the supercamps at 50 kilometers of line of sight. We are seeing that this is simply bullshit, given that most of the time the supercam teams are going to launch between 20 and 25 um, kilometers after the contact line. So basically, now the extent is at least 75 to 80 kilometers in line of sight. There are new things that are coming, like the Zala Z20, which is a simplified version of the Zala 421. It's a bit longer, a bit larger, but has more loiter time, more payload capacity, and also allows for a better definition of a camera. I hope that any Z20 is not shot within the next 2 months because I think it needs to show what it's capable of. And given it's a bit, I'd say, bigger as a target, a loss would also allow Ukrainians to prepare for that in earnest. Most importantly, what is missing from the battlefield right now, I know I'm going to fucking be annoying with this, but it's the unmanned strike assets. We have seen that the Module was still flying because one was allegedly shot down. We saw the carcass of it. We've seen some strikes that are extremely weird on the line of contact, but those could be also either a longer range Isdelia 305, the now enigmatic project of 100 kilometers range, which never, ever was shown again after it supposedly passed its test with, which is based on a Panzer booster. And the most important part that we are seeing here is that Russia is going forward with longer strike assets, but and a lot of people are going to say it. What we have as a problem right here is that it is not actually doing this in a very uniform manner. So on one side, uh, you're going to have this problem. You're going to have this problem for flying objects, artillery, and so on, having something to counter Ukrainian forces. But when it comes to the infantry itself, right now we had this experiment with Optifiber, and I have this discussion with my friend DCZ DCX that the Russians should start slowly going away from the FPV world, not because it's a bad solution, but it's simply a you know a war necessity, and they should go more like the Iranians are doing right now to a more missile type counter force, which is the Almaz or the Spike, if you want that, simply because the Optifiber guarantees no interference. The only way to shoot it down would be a counter value, so APS, CRAM, whatever you want to have for the Ukrainians, but not electronic warfare. And also, that thing is going to have a lot of momentum. Most of the FPVs, as you know, are flying between 120 and 30 as they dive terminally, and they rely into rather good or bad electric detonators. Sometimes with impact, if they're fast enough, of course, but most of the time it's electrically detonated. with the Almaz or whatever the Russians gonna have with it, you're going to fly at 600 kilometers as a minimum. 450 maybe 600 750 you are having ATGM but with a visual reference, and you can fire that probably the same length of pool that you fired your FPV. That 10 kilometer of optic fiber is going to be also be used, but the Russians are not going there. They are still counting FPVs, they are still counting of lancets, they are still counting artillery. It's interesting because cost wise indeed it's cheaper, but at the end, as I said, given how the Ukrainians have less, for the Russians, getting a superior quality option for infantry would be, in my opinion, a lot more interesting than going for, this 500 to 1,200 euros or dollars, whatever you want to count for it, FPVs, which of course you can lose multiple times, but are not guaranteed to have the same impact as a 3-4 kilogram specific warhead that you're going to put through a Abrams, Leopard, Challenger, T-84, T-64, T-80, and you are going to obliterate that shit. All this while maintaining full control of where you're going to hit. Of course, the speed is going to require a different preparation. You will have to be sure to where you're striking. The FPV, in a sense, has the advantage that you can have a waypoint for it. With so far, what we have for the flying objects used as ATGMs like Spike or the MMP on the French side is that you have to have a general azimuth for it. So basically, the drone is gonna indicate where you're gonna fire it, and because you are so high and see everything, you're gonna find your target quick enough, and then you're gonna dive on it. There needs to be a less primitive targeting method for these missiles, but that means that your cost is going to be more expensive than simply what you're gonna have with a FPV. So in that aspect, what the Russians need right now is first of all to go down to the basics and ask themselves, okay, so far we're at this point, so strategically, tactically, up to the battalion level, the Ukrainians have nothing over us. And it's the truth. The Ukrainians are going to receive Atakams, they had Tochkas, but it's still not enough to contest Iskander right now. They still have Storm Shadows. They're gonna maybe have uh, GSO or Jasm with F-16s that will come. But deep down, all these are hand-me-downs. So they need to be extremely careful to what they want to hit, and then if they want to hit Iskanders, they need to absolutely prepare a huge fucking operation to hit at least, I don't know, 3-4 batteries. And right now, the Russians are way too far for that. Also, one thing very important, no Patriot has been able to intercept Iskanders on the field. So while both sides are 50-50, when you are in the city, as I said, the Patriot is going to be into the defensive, and it's going to know where to aim for because it is the target. When the Patriot is fulfilling its air defense uh, zone, so basically shooting down planes, not incoming missiles, the Patriot needs to fucking hide because it's in the open. It cannot stay passive for as much as it wants. And therefore, this is the biggest problem that we have in this discussion about Patriots and Iskanders. So far, out in the open, while fulfilling its air defense cover tasks, the Patriot has failed miserably. They have lost at least 6 launchers for proven 2 aircraft, which are not even ground and pound bombers. They've shot down allegedly two Sukhoi 35s, which are mostly hunting for aircraft in this case. So, in that aspect, the problem of the Patriot, or the problem of any kind of Ukrainian air defense right now, is that they do not control their whereabouts when they are in the open doing the task they're supposed to do. On that aspect, as I said, the Russians have the upper hand by definition just because of the range of the Iskander, plus other problems that they have. So the Lancets are there, a KH, Beta 35 or 58 or 69, doesn't matter. They're there. All these little things make it impossible for Ukraine right now, even with a vamped up aircraft force, to contest the Russians. So my biggest problem, and this is the only thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to finish. My biggest problem I have now is that the Russians should not stay put just with the ISR. ISR is fine; it allows them to make better use of their weapons they have now. But the point is that they need to adapt that ISR to the weapons they should have tomorrow. As I said, UMPKs right now are ruling the line of contact plus 30 kilometers, even further. But the UMPB and all those longer range, like the Grom, for instance, uh, ammunition for aircraft or for ground launched assets, need to also benefit from this. And for that, as I said, you need to give not only a baseline for your, as I said, strategic or large tactical units, but also on the lower down. It needs to be a technological trickle down. Communication, encryption, EV, uh, target assessment, BDA, whatever you want. Russians need to literally step on 21st century. They have done steps towards it, and we're seeing the results. But this is something I've kept seeing and kept saying as well. Right now, they're doing everything they can in this kind of proxy war against the NATO capabilities, and it's going okayish due to how the fucking war is laid out. But if right now they're having this upper hand, I spoke about this leveling the playing field when it comes to ISR. Well, imagine if the playing field is not only leveled. Imagine that a Ukrainian attack, instead of having to deal with the shit show that's happening right now at the Russian border, where they're still put, a Ukrainian attack with 7, 8 vehicles just gets taken out right away by whatever you fucking wanted. Lancets, um, UCAVs, Almaz, whatever. And I know it takes time because border is big and so on and so on. But when it comes to what we're seeing in detection capabilities, the Russians are far better than what they used to be even a year ago. So what if all these capabilities are trickled down to the baseline soldier, and the Russian military gets where it is supposed to be right now, and also is used as a, let's say it honestly, a lab rat for the Chinese and everyone who's going to have to deal with Western powers tomorrow morning, because that's what it is as well. This war in Ukraine is a huge lab when both sides are deprived of air superiority, and I think the Americans, given what's going on in Ukraine, should be extremely worried about their air superiority, given the kind of theater they want to engage into in the future, which is mostly Asia, where the ranges are going to be completely different with what's going on between Ukraine and Russia right now. We are speaking about 5 to 10 times more average range on both sides. Of course, with China having a huge advantage when it comes to Taiwan. But whenever this war is going to happen in Asia, the Chinese are going to be dominating the topographical battle. So the only possibility is something that's not happening right now in Ukraine, which is naval warfare, and it's not going to happen against China. That the Taiwanese are going to start using USVs simply for the fact that the Chinese are going to reply with UCAV and drones, for which the Taiwanese will not have any uh, answer as it stands. I'm not even speaking about missiles and shit. I'm just speaking purely on UCAV side. The Chinese are just gonna fucking start fielding 400 or 500 of them right off the fucking bat. And I'm sorry to say, but this is how the Russians should have trounced the Ukrainians in 2022 instead of having the bullshit that they did. But bygones are bygones. The Chinese are a completely different dragon than the bear right now. And we are going to focus on what we know and what is happening now instead of what is going on. But I would say that whoever is dealing with NATO strategy and the American power right now, they should be scared shitless. That, as I said, a semi-flaccid, the Russian ISR is playing all these shitty games. And people's going to say, yeah, but it's Russia. Yeah, it's Russia, but they have none of the ISR uh, capabilities. And I'm honest, I'm probably the biggest zero there's in fucking Twitter, but it's a reality. The Russians start with a huge handicap. They're bypassing that by many means, uh, indigenous loaned, and they're getting there, but it's taking them 2 years already. And of course, this attrition game plays in their hands, and so on and so on. So the whole point here is having the Russians keep going with their system, for some reason also stop shitting around and playing around with um, these hybrids that I want to try, and going for some systems that exist that can also be denied plausibly that they're not Chinese and stuff. I mean, the artillery rounds that we saw for 122 are easily deniable, although it's written made in China on it. And once again, I'm not saying it's made in China, but you know what I mean. So right now, the Russians, with the operation that we saw, show that they are capable of doing things. This has to do with a lot of things that have been changing, and it, in my opinion, is going to go like this until the Ukrainians either get a shot in the arm by a open NATO intervention, either something happens politically that forces both sides to simply stop trying to go for the maximalist solution, which I already think that Russians have forgone. But convincing the Ukrainians that the war is lost is going to be the most completely delirious job right now, because they keep doing things that make life more complicated for them. And many people are saying this: instead of attacking two critical railroads for the Russians, they keep attacking shit that the Russians don't need right away. And I'm saying these Russians are going to eat grass or are going to refine their shit in Belarus or even China and pay an extra cost for it just to see the Ukrainians die to the last. So all this is a mentally deficient child trying to hit his dad and not understanding that is going to get slapped all over the place. And of course, it hurts all these Ukrainian hits. But as I said, those are mosquito bites. This is not mortal right away. And the quantity and quality of these strikes is not good enough right now. I'm not saying in the future. But for this reason, Russia needs to, unfortunately, expand its destruction, and unfortunately, I'm going to say it honestly, start making hits within dual purpose uh, assets, supermarket storage sites, um, metro stations, train stations. You're gonna maybe kill 20, 30 civilians. Oops. Ukrainians didn't give a fuck when they flew drones in Belgorod and hit civilian dual purpose assets like the city hall, um, a mall pool, a supermarket more recently. It's not a problem. For them, it's not a problem. They just want to kill Russians right now. So I think the Russians should just reciprocate. And of course, yes, there are going to be a lot more Ukrainians dead, but that's the whole point. The point is to let the Ukrainians understand that they're going the Syrian opposition here. They're going the Syrian opposition way. Not that they can keep going and doing all the shenanigans. And it's also to put a wedge between those who are fighting the kind of war that we're seeing, mainly the security services, and the normal population. And people can say, "Yo, no, they're going to be a lot more united." Oh, trust me, they're going to be super united when they're going to have to pay $500 per fucking month not to get drafted. Trust me, it's going to be the most unifying move ever. Therefore, unfortunately, we have reached that point that I spoke about in 2022, where targets need to be far more, how can I say this, large and indiscriminate than they are right now. I may even say they need to start playing the Israeli option in some areas just to be sure that the Ukrainians get the point. And if the Israeli option works for Israel, it should work for Russia as well. I'm not saying legally or politically, I'm just saying militarily. And this is something that the Russians used in Syria pretty well, which was depriving the jihadists of their backfield. Just the same. And of course, it's Pobratima and brotherly people, whatever. Nobody gives a fuck. Right now, you are into a war that Ukrainians are calling straight ahead a survival war. And therefore, the point is that Ukrainians understand that the only way to survive this war is to surrender or stop fighting up to a certain point. That's it. Nobody's calling for genocide, democide, whatever. Point is to make an example so they can start to understand. Because as I said, they will not understand until things get extremely painful for them. And as we see, both sides have a huge threshold for pain that probably European nations do not have. Other European nations do not have. So we're going back to what was discussed 2 years ago. There is no other way for the Russians than to go full violence. If there was any other way once the Ukrainians started to fight. So yeah, guys, that was it for the moment. Please, if you want to intervene, it's up to you guys. So yeah. Hello, General. Please, it's up to you, man.
And
It's okay.
regarding the 122s, I posted a picture from
Yeah, I
the
saw.
museum. The color is there. I mean, but regarding the higher precision on the strikes that you said, I think also that there's a Chinese connection. I've been pretty much looking the recent years. Some military ads they put the same programs as the Russians, basically, where they advertise their military technology. And I think we see the same pattern. For example, the tree line where the bombs had a very precise dispersion and precision in striking, and that was not the case before in the videos we saw when they began really using the UMPKs, and now it's just better. I think that the Chinese hand is there. Then regarding the IFF, I still think that there's not the level of trust that the Russians are willing to give to the Chinese above declarations to rely. I mean, in delicate matters as the IFF it is, with the whole technology transfer and thing they had before, and so I think that is that. Then regarding the how the war should be and the FPV matter, uh, you mentioned the Almaz, but the LMUR missile,
Yeah, the Isdelia 305, yes.
yeah, it seems like to be maybe a longer range one, precisely doing the same if they can do it in a much higher industrial scale and having the economy of scale there and in a reduced size or adjusted range model, then that could be viable. But I know we discussed this plenty of times. I still think that the VVS is a great absent because they would have been, at least now that the UMPK has become the munition of choice, at least generate more sorties by taking out the 24s like you suggested, or more numbers of 34s being made in Novosibirsk, or adjusting all the other squadrons to learn. I mean, the how to employ them, and not just them, also uh, the cassette bombs, probably in anti-infantry role, they could be even more devastating and solve somehow the FBV barrier that the Ukrainians are effectively using nowadays. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Yeah, bro. I mean, on that aspect, when I also posted a snippet of a document that the Russians had prepared in 2017 on how they saw the evolution of the non-line of sight assets, and they had planned a 15-kilometer range for the Izdelia 305, but launched vertically. I also posted that initially the Izdelia 305 was designed to be incorporated into a VLS, given the fact that the rear fins were foldable perfectly for a canister. The problem with the VLS is that, as you said, it would need to be scaled down, but tremendously in order to be man portable. Of course, on another sense, the Russians are going around with Cornet, which is like between 25 and 32 kilograms heavy, depending which variant you're going to use, plus the tripod and stuff, and you are roughly at 48 to 62 kilograms. But as I said, those are multiple parts. You just grab two guys and you're ready to go. With a miniature Izdelie, you will need to have a self-contained launcher, a bit like the Javelin, but not like the Javelin, and also the whole process of miniaturization would have to go down to a certain point where the Iranians are using, as I said, a proven concept, which is where they captured a full intact spike. They reverse engineered it, and they found out that some things were to be changed, or probably they didn't want to have the problems that the spike has, because from the videos we've seen, we concurred with DC that the Almaz is slower, which makes it also more interesting because it's going to be a lot more maneuverable and you have a lot more room for error. And it's fast enough to have the kinetic strike force in order to both have a impact fuse or a contactless fuse, whatever you want. While I was aiming at a lighter product, self-contained if possible, is that the Russians right now are going around with, it's true, between 16 and 21 kilograms of FPVs. This, in my opinion, is not stupid, but as I said, it's a ghetto solution. And of course, we would like for it to be, uh, you know, gone to something more qualitative and more lethal, because both sides are using now FPVs a lot more to take care of, rather light skinned vehicles, and sometimes it works also with heavy armor, because some idiots on both sides are not properly covering their tanks. We had the case with the T 80 BVM that didn't have a neck cage, and the T-72M1 which didn't have any kind of fucking contraptions against FPVs. Both of them went up in flames. The BVM, of course, with the usual problem with its turbine, literally blew up. But this is what I'm explaining: is that the FPVs are gonna still work if you are gonna go vanilla out there. But put a spike, almaz, javelin, whatever. Although the javelin has had its fair share of misses due to uh, heat reverberation, my problem that I have right now is that I do not see the Russians going towards some things that I would, you know, consider vital. As I said, UCAVs are probably there somewhere in some fucking hangar, but they're used as ISR or pocket ISR. Uh, Ground launched lures are not used, although it would help with a lot of situations. Let's say it like this: helicopters are nice and they're fast, and you can, like, be extremely flexible for them, but they still gonna fly high enough and close enough at 50 plus kilometers. If there is a book in the area, you may have a problem. If there is RBS in the area, you may have a problem. So the distance is a factor, but firing from the ground in some cases allows you to be a lot more concealed than flying up, because noise, radar, whatever. Now, as for the rest, I agree with you, and that's my point here. I think that there is a Chinese hand there, and this is also a way for the Chinese to both show themselves without showing themselves, but also to talk to the Americans by saying, "We're gonna fucking what you're doing to the Russians in Ukraine, we're gonna do to you in Europe." And from the beginning, this has been the main takeaway. And I said the very first day of this invasion, the Americans, by not letting Ukraine fall, by putting all their eggs in the European basket, are now tied in Europe and are going to be forced to make the Europeans pay. And I had this discussion after the Polish prime minister said that they would try and push the whole of NATO to pay 1% more for their defenses, which roughly for the Eurozone alone should be 170 billion. Um, this would mean that the top four is going to shell between 112 and 120 billion euros, which is a fuck ton of money for those four. Of course, the Germans, being the biggest economy, will have to spend easily 45 billion more per year on top of the 100 billions that are already earmarked until 2027. But that's not sustainable for the kind of economy that the Germans have in their hands. Any European nation right now has that problem, because the social net is that more expensive. And the whole idea of the Europeans going to a war economy also doesn't make any sense, because, as I said, and we have had that in Albania, we actually had this problem when a lot of the production was dual use, but it wasn't qualitatively appealing, although we were forced back then to have it because there was no other choice or so few other choices. But for Europe, starting to produce 1 or 2 million rounds a year without using them makes no sense. And of course, Ukraine is going to stop at some point fighting, or the fighting in Ukraine is going to stop at some point. So, what do you do with all these white elephants when everybody's going to have to spend between 20 and 30 billion in artillery, ammunition, and other kind of production assets? That tooling alone is going to make Europe spend more of its money on things that do not have a direct value. And we had the discussion. I already explained that the biggest problem for Europe right now is that, unlike anyone else in this war, except maybe Ukraine, they have been losing a fuck ton of money. First, it was because they decided to cut themselves from Russia as a energy supplier and as a market, of course. Second, because they are literally shelling money for Ukraine. And third, because this disruption within both the supply chain and the market interaction, they are also losing revenue and actual GDP. And the Swiss had measured this; it's 1% GDP per year. So, on one sense, they are losing by this stagnation. On the other, they are still paying Ukraine a handsome fee to sustain itself in the battlefield. Plus, they are still overpaying for their energy compared to 2021, 2020, and so on. So, generally speaking, um, what is going to decide, in a sense, what I said, the war is not as much the capability of the Americans to give money to Ukraine, is the capability of the Europeans to see what's going on and where this is going. And unfortunately, given how Macron is has been reacting these last couple of weeks, the European triumvirate, let's say it like this politically, which is Italy, Germany, and France, are still harboring the absolute retarded delusion that Ukraine can win militarily. Although we know now that the French military had laid out reports, texts in this case, to fucking Macron saying, "Bro, it's over. Maximalist objectives for the Ukrainians are over." So how do we crash land this or soft land this or whatever? That's the fucking point. On the other side, the Americans, they don't care. Let's be honest. The Americans, even if Ukraine loses half the territory and they don't recognize that Russian victory, what's going to change? Who is going to go to toe to toe with America and say like half of Ukraine that Russia controls works, exploits, whatever you want, is not Russia? The only guys would be the Chinese. But the Chinese have decided they will not go for that until everybody is in agreement with that. That's why I'm saying that at the end, both sides' maximalist positions are not going to fly. But Europe doesn't seem to have learned this lesson here. And that's the point where the Chinese, I think, are going to be more assertive post 2024 if things do not change on the ground, and start literally saying, "I'll stop Putin if you yourself take out Zelensky or calm that motherfucker down." And this is, in my opinion, what's going to happen. The Chinese have their last ace in their sleeve, where they're going to just erupt in this scene and just take the Americans to the shed and pop a bullet behind their ear as world hegemon and saying, "No, you're gonna have to share," like 40 years ago. Of course, it's gonna take time. I'm not saying that it's gonna happen overnight, but my scare is that it's gonna take too much time for the sake of the people on both sides, especially the Ukrainians. Because the measures that the Ukrainians need to take in order to preserve their combat capability and to still be able to do something on the battlefield are going to literally destroy that country even further than what the Russians have done so far. And it's literally on the Financial Times, Trapped Iron posted an excerpt of it. They need between $5 and $13 billion worth of levies of extra tax in order to sustain the combat. If we take the maximum amount, that would be currently 30% of their true GDP, which is roughly around $100 billion, and that's it. It's game. If you need to tax 30% of your GDP out of your guys' pockets, you don't have many choices, and this is why apparently Macron is fucking bewildered. Is that he's like, oh my god, these guys are losing this fucking game, and it's not like there's a breakthrough in Kharkov or whatever. They're losing it in long term. In 1 or 2 years, it's just the money that's gonna start missing, and we can give whatever we want. The money plus the people inside are not gonna be enough. So I went a bit overboard, but the point is this. Indeed, I agree with you. There is a Chinese hand. That was my point initially. And the way they are doing this also resembles a lot the GP network that the Chinese have been advertising since 2016. Uh, but at the same time, you can see that there are a lot of Russian characteristics in that. Is that the Russians are using a lot more tactical ISR, at least on tape, because we don't know what they see as overarching ISR. Like, we don't know if they're a satellite or not, or who has a satellite on top of it. And I think that's what's the claim that Americans are going to make sooner or later, is that the Chinese have satellites just right on that position, and yada yada yada. This proves that the Chinese are ahead of the Russians. Uh, and yeah, for the rest, that was it. So I'm sorry it was a bit longer. Go on, General. I'm adding also Snake. Yeah, General, you can. I don't know what happened.
I just I just wanted to say that whatever it comes, even in the possible raise to 3%, it's going to be paid by us consumers because they just unload it on life costs like they did for the last year and a half on energy and everything. So I don't think that they care there. And the Chinese, as you said, they have the popcorn and they are comfortably in their sofa and they are laughing loud, just injecting as little help as possible because obviously Russians they have the industry to sustain it. The last thing I want to say is about us because there are rumors of kind of battle going on for the KMP, and basically there's an offer for a German takeover. So probably should be Iran metal and a strong Italian push for it also.
Basically,
And
Western countries would build without. We would have to completely reinvest whatever they want to build on us.
I think 122 and a possible 152, 155 line, because they are saying that 122 is needed. I don't know why. Maybe because they have a lot of D30s or 2S1s around. But
Yeah, as you saw, the Bulgarians are sending everything they have. The Poles are cleaning up their stores, and a lot of latest destructions have been the Vodzikas. So I completely understand why they're doing. What we don't understand, I think, both of us not right now, is why would you need a lower range system to get simple blasting after a couple of fire missiles. Oh, okay. Snack is your turn, man.
Yeah. So I just got wind of the conscription plan where they're now taxing people $520 per month when the average wage is like 400. Um, I mean, most of the work to link bank accounts to the conscription system has actually been completed. I'm not sure if they even like do this as an automatic payment or whatever, but it does seem like all the stringent financial measures, including mass bank account freezes and stuff, will be put in place. And yeah, it's going forward. And from just some of the chatter that are from the people that perhaps like have some direct insight into this, and Budanov is the one overseeing the whole program, and also he doesn't give a shit if there's about the concerns of the business community because there's already a small bank run in January that kind of scared people, but yeah, it's happening. The question is, this might yield enhanced numbers of recruits for a few months, but I mean, people are going to find ways to sort of to evade again. After all, like the state capacity of Ukraine, as we know, is pretty much shit. So anyway, but just saying, like this is a thing that, like, if they don't actually mobilize these people, then the whole front just crumbles. So if they're not able to actually just provide um, bodies, it just like the war just becomes untenable, and then there will just be a frontal collapse. So regardless of what happens, like this is going to happen. And the other thing I was gonna mention too, like all this talk about like Western intervention, like it's basically coalescing around ideas of like having Western forces watch the border or just sit in rear areas like Odessa, and just to free up more of these terror bombs to send to the front. The idea is to keep Ukrainians inside the country so that they can continue to go and die in trenches.
Yeah, that that we have discussed about that, and I agree with you. The bank freeze, bank control job has probably been 100% done, and ironically, it is because the Ukrainians went so far into this whole virtual economy, this savvy e-economy or institutions, that the Americans, if you remember, bragged about putting into place with the whole IED when it came both to the refugees and also to the repatriation of so many people, both those that were internally displaced and also those that were abroad. But yeah, I completely agree with you. It's going to be a bloodbath, as we already said. Most of it because if you are going to start not to pay your levy, you're going to have the first recall, second recall, and either you're going to have the Europoviska, people coming and grabbing you at your job, at your house, either you're going to start, sending you a text message. Would you like to pay 520? Yes or no? If you say no, you know what happens. If you say yes, they're gonna withdraw them monthly, and you're not gonna be able to stop it. It's gonna be like a actual communication plan, although it will just be avoid your military service plan. And on top of it, as we said, given that uh, the wealth in Ukraine is so concentrated, I hope that they have a logic of making people pay according to their means. Because if it's 520 for everyone, you're going to have a lot of people who are going to be able to pay those 520 in advance, a whole year if you want, and just get the hell out of the country or whatever. But for the poorest, it's going to be a fight to the death. And we had this discussion in the group that is going to be a rise in corruption. But not only that, you will have to have a huge inflation if people are going to be starting to shit grivnas from their asses in order to be able to afford both their living conditions. As Trapp said, 520 is slightly above the average salary. But even if it was half of that salary, you are still taking out half of that median salary from your people. And just so, in this case, mostly males, for them not to go and get killed. Therefore, you are literally handicapping your own economy, and it's worst variant of what Europeans are having, which are they are paying just to stick it to the Russians. Here, the Ukrainians are going to pay not to die, and those who cannot afford, they're going to go and die. And politically, it's going to be a problem. Sociologically, it's going to be a problem. Um, I mean, as you said, it's going to be a house of cards going down pretty fast if that mobilization does not bring results. If you are pumping for 6 months half of the media revenue in Ukraine, which, as I said, is a hypothetical um, scenario, and you are stalling or you're getting your shit pushed at the front line, then what are you doing? Like, why are we spending this money? If paying more and getting worse, you just change your plan, so to speak. And of course, this is going to go against how Zelensky is managing his country. And we both agree it's going to be extremely complicated to get that dog out of his crib. But I think this is the worst scenario ever, and it's not going to last 2 or 3 months because, as we spoke about, mobilization, just fucking having these guys fitted to a certain point, is going to get 6 to 10 months. So I completely agree with you, man. And like, this is where I think Ukraine breaks for good, not on the battlefield, but on the back. And in a sense, I dread that thing. I dread it because, as you said, when you had the discussion, you risk both a bank run and a border run, and therefore that would be completely understandable for foreign troops to enter Ukraine to block the borders and so on. But if we get to that point, you have a civil war properly in Ukraine because you're going to have foreign troops stopping Ukrainians from getting outside and saving themselves. This is the way to a meltdown. So even if the foreign troops come inside, as you know and as I know, although you are aiming at something different, completely different to me, those troops will have to fight in order for Ukrainians not to flee. If they're just blocking, a blocking cordon for Ukrainians, it's game over anyway. So yeah, as I said, I agree with you, but my scenario for foreign troops coming in, if they don't come on time, is going to be a lot more dangerous than those troops staying just at the Ukrainian border and just repelling people from inside out. That's it.
Yeah, I mean it's gonna be like, I mean, with also just the amount of weapons now just like floating around in Ukraine. I mean, it's gonna, if there is a real border run and they try to block these, there will be a lot of chaos, and it's not, and it's actually gonna lead to an escalation that just that's gonna bring in a lot of just just for the sake of border security and filtering refugees, and then that thing's gonna be mission crept inside Ukraine most likely. I mean, this is a scenario that I sort of gamed out in my head, that like how this intervention happens without sort of conscious effort. Of course, if there's a more conscious effort to occupy strategic areas and power plants and like key facilities, I mean, of course that has to be done earlier. But if they were just responding to border contingency, you could easily see like just many brigades of European troops being put at the border, and then having to step in and create the security zone around the border. This is, but of course, I mean the idea, of course, is Europe is very much wedded to this idea of Ukraine fighting and winning, and I mean one of the more merciful thing is perhaps is just to let them just let the refugees go west, because this is just I just cannot see the Ukrainian state lasting. I mean, it's been remarkably stable despite all this, like despite everything it lacks. It has managed that. Zelensky has also managed that balancing out quite well, where he squeezes just enough, but it's going to get a lot worse. Like this is where like they are basically burning up any remaining political capital to survive this year by getting more and more people to the front just to block whatever Russia has. Is not going to work a second time. So yeah, I mean, the whole thing might end abruptly, and it might end in a state collapse. But we don't know when that's going to happen. But we'll know when we'll know it when we see it.
Yeah, that's the thing with them. Is that they have been pretty much resourceful to, show themselves as enduring when, as we have learned, especially after the German leak, they are in fucking much more dire situation. And now with the French leaks, it's like, I mean, I made literally a thread by saying, how the fuck are we, were we so correct into this approach? Not because we're smart once again, but it made sense with what we saw. And like, I was like, if this is what we're seeing, then this is what should happen or should exist. But now having multiple sources literally uh, validating, even not 100%, but validating enough our options, is like, oh my god, then these people are going to go down hard. And as you said, we will not know when, but some decisions, like it happened with the counter, like the Orbat, the preparation of the troops, the lack of interoperability between the brigades, the very loose order of battle and follow up in the battlefield. Yes, all these, as we said, are just reinforcing my feeling and are going towards what you said, that we might see a crumble after actually they've already crumbled, a bit like what happened with Avdiivka, where everybody was saying, oh, okay, these guys are done. And I would like once again to tell people to apologize to Syriac when he said before everyone else that there is a pull up and a pull out order, or a pull out movement. He said that 10 days after it was official, because simply they're cracking. And I think the same is going to happen, of course, with a completely different time frame for the Ukrainians at some point. Hopefully, as I said, in order for whatever is left of the Ukrainian polity sooner than later, because as we are seeing, the Russians are going towards a far more damaging game plan initially thought. And we might see exactly what we were screaming for at the beginning of the war: the bridges, the dams, the power plants. But they're going to go for it. And as we saw, the Russians are not fucking around when they want something. And yeah, I mean, there is not much more to say on that aspect. The only thing is that if economically the Ukrainians are going to take those decisions, and as you said, there are a lot of elements that indicate they're going to do it, then I think that's going to be their Hail Mary in a sense. But with what we've seen so far, is going to be their bullet in the brain, their Russian roulette, but with a flintlock. So yeah, it is what it is, man. Guys, if anyone wants to intervene, it's going to be the last couple of questions I'm going to take. It was supposed to be a short one, it's being a bit longer one. And honestly, what's going on is simply unthinkable a year ago, but yet a year ago, all these things were happening. Or it's simply that the Russians weren't showing as much. But indeed, there is a great learning curve that has been just overtaken by the Russians, and it's only going to become worse and worse and worse for Ukraine unless things change radically on what they want to do. And I'm not saying on the battleground, but I'm saying on the political and rear areas. And that's it. Either you go all in Hail Mary, either you just you just tap out, not immediately and openly, but you start, trying to cajole the Russians in some areas, and then try to lose as little as possible in the coming negotiations. But as Snake said, this is not Zelensky. Zelensky is going to go on to the last Ukrainian for many reasons, and one of the reasons is that he thinks he's Ukraine now instead of being only its clown in chief. Let's say it like this. Okay, Z, it's up to you, man. Yes, Snake, you can add something, please.
No, I mean, I just want to say, like, it's really ironic that that people constructed this whole narrative that there was some kind of rivalry between Zelensky and the Nationals, when right now the Nationals actually have like way more power than they ever did under a guy like Budanov, who has been generously rewarded for his loyalty. I mean, he's basically overseeing the conscription effort. He has oversight over the banking system, and now apparently, from what I'm being told, like the GUR actually has they actually oversee like weapons transfers from the West, so they get to siphon off whatever the fuck they want, right? I mean, it's a completely oversized, bloated organization for what it does, like military intelligence. But it's just now, like they're more the nationals themselves are more powerful than they ever were, and if they want to force the country to, commit a national masada, like they will. I mean, this is how nationals create their enduring propaganda. Even if they fail, like they want to inspire future generations. I mean, what the whole like attacking, like probing into Belgorod, in a very perverse way. It kind of reminds me of what happened in the American Civil War, where you more or less, like, basically from 1862 onward. I mean, I don't know. This is not the way they teach in the history books. If you look at a fucking map, from 1862 onwards, the Confederacy was doomed. You had basically had the blockade. You lost Mobile, lost New Orleans. Was in the process of losing the entire Mississippi. Basically, it was basically just it was put under stranglehold, and pieces are being cut off. But if people focus on those, like the border actions where they were moving armies, attacking Pennsylvania and doing this or that, and how how it was this perception that the war is always going to go. But basically, from 1862 onward, like, there's only one way that this was going to go. And right now, what you're seeing with this obsession with attacking of Belgorod is like creating this myth that that Ukraine's that even if Ukraine completely disappears as a country, I mean, they'll still write about how heroically the defenders of Ukraine sacrificed themselves to do this like suicidal charge into the heart of the Russian beast. So
It's
it's just like Pickett's charge. I mean, the same shit.
yes, it's literally as the Finnish narrative. The Finnish lost far more than the Soviet bargained for. But yeah, they Simoyaya, they killed the Russians or Soviets, whatever you want to use. I completely agree with you. The whole narrative is also very speaking to me because, well, as Balkanics, we had that with the Ottomans. We quote unquote resisted to the last one, but I think instead of taking that wrong aspect, I think that as a Balkanic, I currently am thinking of something completely different in the sense that what is needed is a ceasefire and accepting that unfortunately you are under the shadow of a giant, however weak he has grown, but unfortunately, as I said, it also rings a bit bitter with us as Balkanics, and it's true. We have this huge problem of accepting this shadow, but that thing is not how the Ukraine-Russian relationship has been going. Like the whole Soviet era made Ukraine what it is right now. I mean, both technologically, people-wise, and so on. So it's very, as I said, for me, it's completely crazy that we are having this discussion. But yeah, they chose the finish option, and this is what's going to happen to them. And unfortunately, this is what it is. Go on, Suni. Hello, man. I don't think there is a operational pause happening now. I mean, you should just look at the Russian advances and losses all over the area. It's just that what they did with Avdiivka is they bypassed it, and now they are exactly where the Ukrainians should have been. Still, and Ukrainians are no more there. They have completely gone from the flat, and they've gone from the lowland. They're back to Semenivka, and the point is that once they reach the Semenivka line, they're going to push to Ocheretino, which wasn't my option initially. I would say that they should have gone as fucking crazy towards Ocheretino to simply get the Ukrainians to panic even more. But the options chosen, given where they are in Novomikhalovka, given where they are in Pervomaisk now, that Nevelsky has been lost, and given where they're pushing all over the southern Donbass, there is no operational post. It's just, as we said, the big stronghold being Avdiivka, it necessitated a huge push because the Russians do not still have a solution for defensive hedgehog cities like Avdiivka, other than push the Ukrainians as further as possible from their defensive positions and then work them out, slice them as salami. If there was a operational pause, then the Ukrainians should have recovered some points, but that's not what happened. What has been what has been happening, sorry, I'm cutting you one last time. What's been happening is that the Russians are still balancing the whole line. Is this wise? I think yes, you might have another opinion, but I don't think there is an operational pause right now. I think the operational pause will happen in June for sure, because they need to watch out where they're going with this. Please go on. Well, it's not that. It's very simple. It's the Russians right now haven't put the same kind of force that the Ukrainians pushed for Rabotino, and still they have recovered 27% of what they lost into the salient. On the other side, they are pushing the whole line. The Ukrainians decided to push three main points. They quickly lost one push, which is around Kamenskoye next to Zaporozhye, and they went for Orikov and then for the Vremensky Ledge. Meanwhile, they were pushing back in a very stupid fashion in Bahmut slash Artemovsk, and they also lost that gambit. The problem is that now we are seeing a reverse operation from the Russians, which is still pushing over 500 to 600 kilometers of front, of course, with flashpoints. We are not speaking about like this. No, of course not. But I'm telling you, the problem is this. The thing is that people should stop thinking big arrows now, simply because big arrows require a logistical plan and a pre-planning on the Russian side, which is still not possible. given the assets the Ukrainians have, a logistical pre-planning when it comes to the Russians could be possible, like it's happening right now with Avdiivka, where they are getting within the city and starting to make caches, make dumps. And initially, they tried to use the old hangars on the coke plant, and the Ukrainians fired on them with whatever they could fire, HIMARS, ground launched small diameter bombs, and so on, just because the Ukrainians were using the exact same spots to hide their own vehicles. That's the thing right now. Every single advance on the Russian side is going to be slow because the logistic lines are going to be threatened at every single moment. It's unfortunate, but it is how it is. The UNPK solves some situation when it comes to pushing the enemy back, but it doesn't go far enough to allow the Russians to avoid the HIMARS strikes. And now with the potential transfer of ATACMS and maybe more ground launched small diameter bombs, you're going to have the same issue that has happened for a while now, that the Russians push 15, 20, 30 kilometers, like in Bahmut, and then they're trying to establish, strong points, dumps, and so on, and they get visited each week or so by HIMARS. This unfortunately has to do with the format of the war right now, which is proxy war, and which means that some assets are not touchable. That's it. But as I said, for every flip, you have a reverse coin, and it's the same for Ukrainians. Ukrainians cannot do what they want with their weapons, and then also do not have the weapons to do what they want. It's not just no. It's not the explanation. It's just like right now, it's going to be a creeping offensive. It's going to be maybe 20 kilometers each 3 to 4 months, and those 20 kilometers are going to cost both sides a lot of people, but with the logic and the option that one side cannot waste the amount of people they'll be losing, and that side is Ukraine, and for the Russians is not optimal either. But so far, the losses inflicted by the Ukrainians are just not enough to stop them. The biggest situation that Ukrainians have is that, for instance, Russians have found a answer with the UNPKs. They're going to find a better answer with Iskander. They're going to find a better answer with further guided standoff weapons. Ukraine needs to think about how to make sure that those Russian advancements do not yield the results that the UNPK has been yielding the last 6 months. And also, there's another problem. Ukraine is lucky that Russia doesn't have a strong air component. If Russia had the air component that America has, given the absolute shit show that the Ukraine air defense system is right now, it would be a completely different matter. And the Russians can still fortify their air wing, especially when it comes to bomb trucks. Now that they have UMPKs, any Su-24 can do that shit. Of course, it's going to be a little more expensive to fly them, given they're gas guzzlers and they have a more limited range. But who the fuck cares? You just make them fly. They drop their fucking 60, 70 kilometer bombs. They go home. And instead of having the Su-34 doing back and forth, suddenly you have 2-3 times the fleet that you have to bomb truck, and you have a huge solution for that. Russians are not doing it for the moment because they do not want to overinvest in this war. People are going to say, yeah, but that would shorten the war. I'm not even sure of that. We've seen that every time the Russians have pushed forward with enough strength and vigor, the Americans have provided over the so-called red lines assets to slow them down. And that part is gonna go on. And it's true that Russia, for some reason, have accepted this attrition war that plays in their hands, but is extremely slow and grinding. Now, if things change, then we have another problem, and that problem is that the Americans will have to choose if they want to risk, as I said, a continental war, or if they just want to play this absurd game they played with the Baltic countries after World War II, where they wouldn't recognize the Soviet government of those countries. To me, it doesn't matter. To me, it's all the best. I don't give a fuck, honestly. It would be better for everyone if America just played this stupid game, and at the same time they are losing the battle. But everything else flies as well for me. If the Ukrainians tap out in 2025, all the best. If they don't and they go to the finish, it's going to be sad for both parties. But it's their choice. On the Russian side, the choice has been made in 2022, in September 2022, that first of all, 4 more oblasts for Russia, fine, and a military pursuit to this campaign until the Ukrainians tap out. And of course, it's not easy, and of course, there are going to be losses, and of course, the war is going to evolve in ways that we're seeing right now with the strikes on refineries. On the other side, the Russians literally hitting shit that was unseen, unexpected before. But this is how these longer wars evolve. The difference is that it is not Iraq-Iran, it is not ex-Yugoslav wars. It's a actual superpower, although redimensioned, like Russia, against a crumbling polity like Ukraine, despite the help, despite everything. And if tomorrow I hear from Europeans that yeah, we are supporting Ukraine, I would spit on them because they're not supporting anything, absolutely anything. They just are killing Ukrainians to score brown points against Russia. But that's it. So yeah, if someone wants to intervene, please guys, do it. Otherwise, I'm. But the problem is that Moldova is going to be a stretch. I do not think that the Russians are going after Moldova. I think that if the Ukrainians actually tap out and they accept some kind of maximalist request from the Russians, which would be Odessa. So, Odessa Oblast has a direct border with Moldova, but more specifically with Transnistria. Then, yeah, given what the PMR parliament pointed out, there is very much a possibility, given Moldova is outside of any alliance except for Romania, that the PMR is going to be attached as well in a way or another. I do not think that the Russians are going to go for any other front right now. In Syria, it's going to be extremely complicated because the number one problem for the Russians in Syria is Turkey. And Turkey is a NATO member. Turkey controls the Bosphorus. And Turkey, for every single shitty thing they've done in this war, have also provided Russia with a lifeline. Turkey has played the perfect frenemy. Like, they've played both sides. And I think that Putin is trustful of the Turkish game there, not of Erdogan. Erdogan's going to always score easy points when he wants to. But in that aspect, Erdogan makes the same calculus as Putin. The war, win or lose, for Ukraine, I mean, means that Turkey is going to cash in because Ukraine loses, it still needs to rebuild a lot of territory. And guess who is going to be the number one party to help out, especially with the rearmament of Ukraine as it stands? Well, the cheapest offer right there and the most interesting partner would be Turkey. Instead of buying expensive shit from Poland or K9 from Korea. Just go for the Turkish K9, the Firtina. It's not going to be a huge difference. Drones, the Turks have helped with Bayraktar. Of course, it was a dead end pretty early on, but which other system could do what the Bayraktar did initially? No one. The problem with Ukraine is that they do not have much help there, and of course, with the choke point on the Bosphorus, the Turks are invaluable partners for them and for Russia as well. Plus, Turkey has a huge problem with Armenia. Armenia is trying to get outside of Russia's orbit. However, it cannot do that because Azerbaijan is playing on its strength right now and trying to gobble more Armenian territory. So the Armenians just cannot suddenly turn around and say, okay, we want NATO, whatever, simply because Turkey is going to stop them. Therefore, there too, Russia and Turkey have a role to play, and there will not be a Syrian counteroffensive to expel the Turks from the north. What could well happen is that the Russians and Syrians can turn around and kick the Kurds to the curb and recover more land through that aspect, and that will also force as I said, the Americans to just fucking leave the place. But yeah, Syria has this asterisk with Turkey, and for the rest, I would rather be extremely afraid if I was the Baltics because they've run their mouths a lot, and the biggest problem with the Baltics is that nobody can help them physically. You may have an exchange of territories, so they're going to attack Kaliningrad while losing the Baltics. But physically, to help the Baltics, you would need to cross the Baltic Sea, and what they're doing to the Russians in the Black Sea right now might very well happen to NATO in the Baltic Sea. Never mind the capabilities of the Russian military to turn that place into a shit show. So once again, the biggest problem I have with Russia is that so far the only easy expansion or attachment they can do is, yes, it's just the PMR. All the rest, attacking Georgia and annexing, for instance, Abkhazia, makes no sense because the Georgians, despite the Georgian shitty legion in Ukraine, Georgian government has been extremely helpful for the Russians. This is one of the things that I want people to understand. This war is not some kind of world war for Russia. This war is just putting NATO at its fucking place and telling everybody, if you want some, I can give you some. But right now, I'm dealing with this shithead, which in this case is Ukraine. Therefore, I do not see the Russians doing anything else but getting what quote unquote is theirs. And in this case, the PMR is theirs. And Ukraine, quote unquote, unfortunately is theirs. At least the areas they want from Ukraine. And that includes, in fact, Odessa and all the Yuzhno-Ukrainsk part there. And of course, a huge part of the Nikolaev Oblast. Because we need to go across the fucking Oblast to reach Odessa. And given their experience with Zaporozhye, it would mean at least 80 kilometers deep buffer area from Odessa towards the land, and that means a lot of Ukrainian territory gone, on top of being landlocked and so on. So the war would need to get to a very bad point for Ukraine for them to accept those conditions, and that would mean, like, yes, we are speaking about, and I said that probably half a decade or even a decade of war and a decade of massacres of Ukrainian military and Russians, of course, but that means if the ratio is what it is right now, over 1.5 million casualties for the Ukrainian side as a minimum. So, yeah, we are speaking unheard horrors. So yeah, please. Okay, guys. I'm going to end up with one small thing. And that small thing is why the attacks on Kursk and Belgorod are extremely worrisome for the Russians. Those are PRs to begin with, but what are worrisome is that despite a preventative attack and action from the Russian side to take out a grouping in Akhtirka, which apparently was the most problematic group. It was a GUR, sorry. The Ukrainians still went with their fucking shit show, which, as we are seeing now from geolocation and stuff, didn't even reach Russia. They maybe entered 200-300 meters within Russia when they managed to, but the fact that they still went for it after losing equipment and men initially before even the attack started shows to me that I'm not saying it's desperation, but as Snake said, these people, they don't care about Ukraine or the people that are getting to get killed, which may or may not be Russian. And that's what makes everything so dangerous right now. They're not normal in their worldview because they do not have that control anymore. In 2022, Ukraine had control, had so fucking control. But now they don't. Now they cannot fucking fly a helicopter 60 kilometers after the line. They get fucking smirched. Their biggest asset, Western top-end weaponry, is getting taken out. And of course, Russia is losing more. But that's the thing, Russia has more. And this is the whole point that we're getting here. And that raid, in my opinion, and this strike that the Russians did is showing where this war is going. On one side, we're going to mental illness territory and obsession. And on the other side, we're going to a cruise control war, which, in my opinion, is going to allow the Russians to just fucking turn up the heat. And as I said, turning up heat means also doing a lot more damage also to civilian infrastructure and to civilian population. And that's it. That's the only thing people wanted to avoid, I think, on the Russian side for a long while. But unfortunately, right now, they cannot avoid anymore. So, yeah, it's a done deal. And hopefully, it's a done deal for, I'd say, for good. That we will not have a flare-up in 10, 15, 20 years. Because it would be a completely different war. And in my opinion, it would end Ukraine as it stands, but also would affect a lot more Europe that this war is affecting right now. So thank you very much, guys. If you want to intervene, I would gladly give you one last question or whatever. It doesn't matter. You're always welcome. But we are at the end of this space. It was a bit... yeah, go on. As everything, proliferation is a matter of cost and the result. I think wasting 500-600 to $5,000-6,000 worth of optic fiber, depending what kind of quality you decide to have, on FPV, it's to me throwing jam to the pigs. That's why my idea is, if you want to go the optic fiber way, just do it properly. Put a good, decent 3-4 kilogram explosive charge, 8 7-8 kilogram payload. Shape it properly. Just put it on a cornet. Just instead of what cornet? You can use the concourse, but with optifiber, and your actuators are going to be more for a ballistic or overarching trajectory, and then you're gonna just fly it down. If the Iranians managed it, why the fact the Russians couldn't do it? This just is something that, as always said, it needs to be at least followed by the Russians, although they already have such a product with the Isdelia 305. But the thing is that whoever is doing these things, it's not the state, it's not the Ministry of Defense. There are people playing around these ideas, and sometimes it works, and it goes to the ears of the procurement bureau, GAP2, whoever needs to know about that, and sometimes it just doesn't. I mean, look at the Privet 82. That thing has almost died out. Nobody's speaking about it anymore. Scalpel, no, that's the thing. Given that it's a scam from the republics, it's still there. They're producing like 20 a month. The issue is that it relies on a FPV module. So the only thing is just a PVC body, and that's it. So yeah, that's the problem that we have right now. So Z, go on, man. I think that you're right on one aspect, but there is a reply to that. First of all, the mobilization of the economy and society on the Russian side is overstated. It's true that Russia is doing something, but if the Russian society was fully mobilized, like everything for the victory, to use a old proverb, Russia wouldn't look the way it looks right now, and also Russia would take a loan from China because it would need offset of goods, components, and so on. What Russia is doing right now is still waging war on a budget. The problem is that a lot of the mobilization in Russia, this mobilization light that happened there, regards also the Russia re-equipping after this war, because that we accept it or not, Russia has lost a huge pool of vehicles and assets. A huge part of those were due to the absolutely shit show of the 3 to 4 first months. And I know people are not going to agree with me, but between 6 and 8,000 pieces of equipment were lost. Let's be honest, guys. So that replacement is going to push Russia at least for a decade. Plus, you need to refill the storages, but this time you're not going to do it with old shit reshaping D30 guns. You are going to do it with stuff that you're using right now and pushing forward. What you said is true, and there is what's going to be more interesting is that Russian society right now is a lot more militarized, a lot more self-asserted than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. A big responsible of that is that in 2014, the bloodshed was rather limited in Crimea, that was basically known, and in 2014 in Donbass, some losses, but both sides lost between 2 and 4,000 people, with, of course, a huge destruction on the Ukrainian side. They lost over 600 pieces of equipment in a few weeks, but most importantly, they lost most of their ready units equipment. Poroshenko went out and said our current army potential was down of 65%, and this was absolutely true. And Russia did that with very few troops. They literally used, I think, 4 or 5 brigades total, with a couple of battalions that were BTGs actually that were inside Ukraine. So the point is that indeed Russia mentally is going to be in a different place, but at the same time Russia needs the current mobilization to just get back to what it was, where it was before the war. And after that, as you said, there will be something more for sure. Taking out the PMR, it's already a huge problem because it puts Russia directly in contact with Moldova. And if you guys have seen how Moldova is shaped out, if you have the PMR on the side, and the Russians have already a group of military forces there, about 1,500 people. This means that Moldova is literally on the front line, and for as long as it's outside the alliance, in this case NATO, Moldova is a target. And I agree with you. But everywhere else, there are interests for the Russians to calm the game, prepare for, indeed, as you said, something bigger, mostly in defense, I think, because once again, I do not think the Americans are going to accept for Ukraine to lose 45% of its territory. Fucking never. They're going to agree to a truce or temporary loss, but they are going to play the Azerbaijani game, with the difference is that Azerbaijan had a slight advantage in population. It was twice the size of Armenia, and also had the money to invest into military technology and forces that were way above what Armenia could muster. And the Armenian mentality just went to this lull that we won the war and Russia is going to protect us later on. In both cases, politically, Armenia lost its fight when it was starting to make all these moves to get closer to Europe, but that's another discourse. So in this case, I do not see the Russians having much in short term as an offensive option to expand the war, not because they cannot do it, but the only way they could expand the war would create a snowball effect. One of the targets, in my opinion, would be to fucking make the Azerbaijanis shut the fuck up, because they are talking too much. They're playing with everybody's balls. Iranians, Armenians, Russians, because Daddy Turkey is there. And on the other side, the fast expansion route, however it is, like against NATO, as I said, would be the 3 Baltic states. That would allow Russia to have a long coastline and easy defendable position from Kaliningrad. But once again, when you start that fight, then you are starting a fight against NATO. And as I said, it's true that locally, NATO is going to have a lot of trouble to mount up a successful defense. But if the push comes to shove, NATO is going to start mobilizing. And unfortunately, the Chinese would have to get involved to counter not Europe, because Europe is going to take some time, but the US. If NATO full charge is tasked to go after Russia, unfortunately, the Russians would have to get help. Therefore, I agree with you. But right now, the situation is not there. And for the Russians, what is needed, in my opinion, is first of all to re-equip, reassemble, and reassess whatever happened and whatever was wrong during the war. There is a shit ton of things that were wrong, others that were right, some surprises, positive and negative, and this would need 2 to 5 years, in my opinion, to digest for the Russian military right now. Because don't forget, it's true that NATO ISR is prevalent and completely dominates the Black Sea. But we don't know how the NATO forces are going to act on the ground. Don't forget, NATO forces are very good when there is weak opposition, but we haven't seen anybody do anything really dangerous so far, really hard. Most of the action that NATO states have been gotten were mostly police actions. France in Africa, America in Iraq and Syria. What else? Not much. And whatever activity is there against Russia right now, it still remains the domain of special forces and small unit combat. But let's say that you're going to start aligning 200 Leopards and 200 Abrams. Where are you going to fucking hide them? NATO doesn't do the whole company level shit that Russia and Ukraine are doing right now due to ISR and deep strikes from the other side. Then what? We have seen and we have as evidence that NATO equipment is not impervious to Russian anti-material assets. And with ERA or NERA on the Abrams, with ERA or NERA on the Bradley, and it takes something as stupid as FPV, I mean, on both sides, taking out T90M, if you are good enough, you're going to fire that shit up with FPV, and we know that you can do just the same with the Abrams, Leopard, and probably the Challenger, given how the fucking tank is built. So once again, it's the ground war that NATO needs to lead, and there are no guarantees right now. But for the rest, air power wise, Russia is going to have to deal with a lot of shit, and will need to be extremely preemptive to basically clear out all kind of airports, air bases within 800 kilometers in order to render it possible for the NATO forces to stack up planes against it. But once again, that would not be what happens with Ukraine. It would be a completely different front. And Russia would have to defend on all fucking directions right now. Russia is forced to defend on what? 300 to 400 kilometers? For real, although the front is 1,000 kilometers, 900 kilometers long. Those are the things that cannot just be explained by, okay, we're militarizing because we want to go to war back at it. No, I think Russia is militarizing because it senses that after defeating Ukraine and getting what it deems being its own, there are going to be shenanigans with the Ukrainians and NATO and the Europeans. I think there we are going more than Russia trying to be aggressive and assertive abroad. Right now, it's a escalate to de-escalate, but it had brought more trouble than, I'd say, positive results. So now the Russians are just making sure that they are not bingo when the war comes. And this is a very dangerous moment because both sides now are thinking that there's going to be a war, but I don't see the logic of it. Ukraine's carcass has nothing to do with Europe except hurt pride. And that's in both cases, by the way. I'm not saying that the Russians have a better case when it comes to Ukraine, but if the Russians win in Ukraine, it doesn't mean that Russia's going to fucking start wandering all over Poland. And it would be the best option ever for the Russians to let the Poles start stacking up debt to fucking finance weapons that they will never be able to use. Well, the Russians need those weapons because they use them. They're replacing them. They are making them better. They're making them more effective. This is the greatest advantage that the Russians have right now. But pushing this advantage too far is just going to bring them back to the same white elephant projects that they had until the war started. So this is my opinion. Sorry if it was a bit long. No problem. Let's go for Viraj Bosnia, please. Go on, man. Viraj. No, they're doing it. Actually, if you saw the videos that were posted, there are two different videos. One is clearly on the coastline, and that I think I was a bit premature because I think only 60 kilometers have been built there or have been slated for construction. Uh, However, both are being pursued, and this is a very interesting fact that they let them uh, just watch and take pictures. That was my disclaimer. But as you said, indeed, both are extremely important, especially now that the um, the Americans have been breaching the Atacams taboo, and of course the ground launched small diameter bomb, which is not going to be a game changer for that range, but it still can be extremely problematic for the accumulation of equipment and for specific points of contention like substation stuff like that wherever or not the line is electrified, of course. If it's not electrified for the moment, it's going to be a diesel loco, then tough luck for the Ukrainians. Yeah, for the moment it's like that. But if you check it properly, they have opened the ground there. I don't know how the fuck the decision went to concentrate on the bypass first and then start building it from. Yeah. I know. I actually initially I thought that the whole rail line was built, not the kind of small stretches that I have been doing right now. But unfortunately, as usual, the Russians are not the giants or the dwarves that we think, so it's always kind of 50-50. However, it means that they are doing their part. It's going to take a bit more time. I think mostly because the Ukrainian counter died out, and the Russians themselves said that, "Whoa, is this it? Like, is this all what it was?" And I think this lulled them also into a fake sense of security, and I hope that they will not be paying this in the upcoming months this year. But I think that that one is being built anyway. It's just that they have quote unquote more time right now. And this is also one of the biggest issues that I have with the initiative paradigm. When you have the initiative and you're going forward, sometimes you have this tunnel vision and you're not seeing where you're going, although you think you're advancing. And I hope the Russians do not get it back because that's what they had last 2022 when they were killing it in Lugansk, and they were just ignoring northern Kharkov because they said like, yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter. We are advancing here. They need to stop us here. But the Ukrainians didn't give a fuck about Lugansk. They knew that they had lost the oblast anyway. So they accepted to get smashed over there. and then just make sure that the sister cities in Donetsk weren't lost, which is, of course, Konstantinovka, Slaviansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkovka. And then they counterattacked up to the Donetsk and to the Oskol, and we had the shit show in September, and then, of course, the logical end of the failure to capture Nikolaev and Nikolaev Oblast generally. So yeah, on that aspect, I don't think the Russians are going to make the same mistake again. But I do think that the failure of the Ukrainian counter maybe was a bit not so helpful, let's say it like this, when it comes to the strategic goals that they slated to this themselves with the building of this railroad. And you're absolutely right. Right now, there is too little to celebrate from that perspective, except of course the enlargement and the cleanup of the highway, the coastal highway, which is now a complete different beast from what it was under the Ukrainian control. No problem, no problem. You're welcome. So guys, there we are. Thank you very much for everything. We will see each other probably, hopefully, still under this account, because as you know, now I have a tendency of getting reported massively due to the fact that I'm trolling a bit too much on the NAFO dogs. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your trust. I will hope that finally my Zappo thread is going to be on, because I am retouching a lot of things due to the defensive constructions on the Ukrainian side, especially now that Mola and others have been mapping the current advancement of those defensive works. And it does indeed null and render part of my plan to go around Zaporozhye extremely wasteful. So I'm going to start with one hypothesis, and then we will see how it turns in the coming months and maybe years. Thank you very much, guys, and have a nice day. Thanks for being with me. Bye-bye.